Welcome to Assembly Update. I'm Mike Friesen. With us for our program today, Assemblyman Mike Norris. A lot going on here at the state capitol right now. Mike Norris, we're glad that you've taken time to help explain it to us and get things all straightened out for us, because we've got a lot of ground to cover here. Specifically, it's budget time, and time's a wasting. I mean, we're down to brass tacks here now to try to get this budget in place in what, just the next, as we tape this program, 10, 11, 12 days.
Yeah, what's happening right now with the state budget is it needs to be done on time. You know, we're sent here, we're paid to do a job, and we need to make sure the budget's done on time. However, with that being said, I just don't see that happening this year because of the contentious issue, particularly with bail reform. Now, I want to be clear about this. I think the budget should be about dollars and cents. It should not be about big policy issues. That should be for another day, for another discussion. However, in Albany, the governor has the power in the budgetary process to drive policy that she wants. And it's probably the most important time of the year for her to actually do that. So she has indicated that she is open to having bail reform changes to the so-called bail reforms before that was adopted in 2019, which I voted against because I knew how dangerous they were. We know our communities are less safe right now under these so-called bail reforms. She understands this from the last election where she squeaked by, and it wasn't just in New York City where people were upset about crime rates. It was all throughout New York. So I do hope that the governor takes this opportunity to use her bully pulpit and the power she has to make sure that we get judicial discretion in the state budget, in state law through the use of the state budget. I'm not a big fan of it. I don't think policy should be in it, but those are just the realities. And it's important
This is one of those times, though, right, where everybody seems to agree something's got to be done. Violent crimes get out of hand all across the state. So if you're ever going to use this to your advantage, get it done in the budget if you can, right?
That's right. And the governor recognizes that. Our conferences recognizes it. I'm not so sure about the downstate driven majorities in the Senate and the Assembly. And that's why she has to take the opportunity when she negotiates a final package to make sure there are changes in there for bail reform and that judicial discretion is put into place, because our judges really have the opportunity to understand and to see what's going on and to weigh the circumstances when an individual comes before them. Many of them are elected. They take their job very seriously, and I trust the judges to do the right thing in determining whether or not to put bail on somebody. But now we should probably move towards the figures. The last 4 years in Albany, we have seen the budgets go up. Listen to this, a total of $56 billion in the last 4 years. Now, just so my constituents know, I voted against every one of those budgets the last 4 years. The spending is way out of control. We can't afford this. When you look at the budgets of Texas and Florida combined, they don't even equal New York. That's how much spending that we have in New York. And I just can't sit by and continue to watch individuals flee the city of New York. Our population continues to go down. They're going to other states where the climate is much better. And it's not about the weather. Okay, we just got through the weather here. It's spring. We have our families here. Our roots are here. People want to stay here. I mean, obviously, the weather is nicer in Florida. We're not going to deny that. But their roots are here, and they want to stay here. And it's not about the weather. The point is they can't afford to live here. And last week, the Assembly majority put forth their one House budget resolution. And they just added everything in the kitchen sink to it, including a streaming tax. Now, if you have YouTube or if you have Netflix or I guess Spectrum streaming, they propose to put a 4% tax on that. I mean, they have not met a tax that they don't like. I voted against that resolution. I oppose that tax on streaming services. And as we move towards March 31st and potentially beyond, I will continue to raise these concerns through the budgetary process that, quite frankly, we can't. They want to raise income taxes on individuals, people who own companies, people who invest in the state of New York. These are problematic issues that just will continue to drive the exodus of people out of New York State. And so I will continue to do that. Now, I do want to mention the Transportation Committee, because when we
Well,
talk about,
let
sure,
me first set up a little civics lesson for everyone here. For those who don't know, the way the budget process works in Albany, it's really kind of easy. The governor starts things off. Last month, she put forward her budget proposal. She handed that to the legislature. You guys take a close look, you rip it apart, you bring in all her commissioners, you talk to them about what's going on in transportation, in education, and all these other areas. Then the Assembly and the Senate each put forward their own budgets. Now there's three budget proposals out there, and that's where we are right now. And now the horse bargaining, really kind of horse trading, comes into play, right? And Mike Norris is going to be playing a big part of that, because you're going to be there representing transportation interests of upstate New Yorkers and all New Yorkers, and trying to figure out what's the best way to spend the transportation portion of the pie that makes the most sense.
yes, so this week there's going to be a joint budget committee meeting on transportation with representatives from both houses, the Senate and the Assembly. And we're going to talk about the priorities within the budget, particularly transportation. Now, as you know, I'm very critical of the spending in the state of New York. I think we spend too much. However, there are certain areas that I think we should be prioritizing and actually investing more. I consider these to be investments, and they include our roads and our bridges and our culverts. Uh, just recently, I saw a study from the Comptroller's Office that a lot of our bridges in New York State are just not up to proper code. They are deteriorating at a rapid rate, and we need to make key investments right now. So I will be advocating at this conference committee meeting for additional CHIPS funding. So right now, they have $538 million in CHIPS. Now, I just said the governor proposed a $227 billion state budget. 227 billion. It's probably going to be closer to 230 when it's all said and done. This is a drop in the bucket. And one of the most important things that the state of New York should be doing, and that's making sure that our infrastructure is up to code, is proper, and people look at our infrastructure when they determine whether or not they want to invest their businesses here. So this is a very important thing. So I'm advocating for an additional 200 million for our CHIPS program and our early extreme winter recovery program, which will actually help fix additional potholes and issues from the storms. An additional 70 million in that as well, because these are important priorities, and these things need to be fixed and addressed right now. So that's what I will be doing this week, and I hope that my colleagues on both sides of the aisle and in both houses also agree, particularly upstate, because we spend a lot of money on the MTA, the subway system in Long Island and New York City, and that's how the folks get around down there. I represent upstate New York. We get around by our roads. Our school buses are on the roads, our fire trucks, people traveling to and from work and school, getting around. This is how we move around. Our farmers utilize our roads, and we got to make sure they're protected. So this is very important to me. This is about priorities. The other things I want to mention in our priorities is to make sure we keep, for example, our library system strong. For many, many years, Governor Cuomo kept the library system flat in terms of funding. The library system now provides so many more resources than ever before. You can get your online subscriptions. We use it for all types of services, broadband services, which is a whole area in my neck of the woods where people do not have adequate broadband, and that's something else that should be a key investment in our budget. And our veteran services and our volunteer fire services, which I know we're going to talk about briefly at the end of the program. These are the priorities. And on the flip side of the ledger, we need to make adequate cuts where appropriate, particularly when you look at Medicaid and the amount of money that we spend on Medicaid. It's to the tune of $90 billion. Now, I'm not, and I've said this many times, I'm not opposed to helping someone who needs a hand up, okay, for a little bit of assistance, maybe 6 months or a year. But after that, if you're able bodied and you're able to go to work, you should be working. And the cycle dependency of 5 and 10 and 15 and 20 years of being on social services it cannot happen anymore. We have to be responsible. We should provide for our direct care workers, for those with developmental disabilities. Those are areas that certainly we should be responsible for and helping. But on the other side of the aisle, we have to rid out fraud and waste, and we got to make sure that people who are able to work actually do work. And I think most people
Well,
agree with me that.
we're already down to our last couple minutes, so let's talk to those people that provide those services to the state. There's a lot of people watching this program who are my age, give or take, who remember that, when the lottery system was allowed to be created in New York State, all that money was supposed to be earmarked specifically for education, just like the lockbox that the throughway tolls were all supposed to go towards road maintenance. There are some people who say, you know what, maybe it would be a good idea to take some of those surcharges, all those surcharges you see on your cell phone bill, and maybe do something positive and constructive with that. And I know you're one of those people, Mike Norris.
There is a surcharge, well, when you look at the details of it, 42% of that surcharge. Now, I have to tell you, when I first came to the assembly, I just assumed that the whole thing went back into reinvestment into our communication systems for our emergency services and other types of police services, but that's not the case. 42% of the surcharge on your cell phone bill just goes back in the New York General Fund, just out there. So I've introduced legislation that would require that 42% also goes to our volunteer fire service. It goes to our police services, other types of communication needs. We just suffered the blizzard, for example. It would provide those funds could be used towards equipment and apparatus. For example, snowmobiles, ATVs, boats. Up Lake Ontario is part of my district. Always an issue with our volunteer fire company. My plan would be to make sure that 42% that just swept into the general fund would now go back into local emergency services funding, which would include communications, equipment, apparatus, and whatever the needs are. So we know that those dedicated funds out of that communication tax will go back to where most people think that's where it should be. Another thing I want to point out on our volunteer fire service, I represent 25 volunteer fire departments in my district. The mileage tax credit, for example. These volunteers are going to and from accident scenes, to and from the fire station, and they're using their personal vehicle. In the state of New York, our volunteer fire service saves property taxpayers over $4 billion every year. $4 billion. But over the last 20 years, the numbers have gone down in the ranks by over 20,000 statewide, while the calls have actually doubled. There is a recruitment and a retention issue. This has been studied by the task force that I had the original bill that created it. And we need to do our part to help recruit and retain them. And I think the legislation that Senator Orton and I have co-sponsored together in both houses to provide a mileage tax credit where they can get reimbursed for their wear and tear and their gas for miles that they use in the course of their duties is appropriate, and I am hopeful that will get passed very soon to help our volunteer fire service.
And that's going to have to be it for us. We are smack out of time. Mike Norris, thank you for spending your time with us. We'll get you back out to those budget negotiations and try to get this thing wrapped up in the next week or so. Thank you for joining us today.